Hello, and welcome. This is your time to relax, listen, and let your brain learn English naturally. You don't need to repeat. You don't need to think too hard. Just listen and enjoy the story. Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's begin. It was a quiet morning. The sun was soft, and the air felt calm. Maya sat by the window with a warm cup of tea in her hands. She looked outside and watched the trees move gently in the wind. Today felt different. She didn't know why, but something inside her felt ready. Ready for change. Ready for something new. Maya had always wanted to speak English confidently. She understood many words, but speaking felt difficult. Sometimes she felt shy. Sometimes she felt nervous. And sometimes she stayed silent. But today, she made a small decision. I will try, she said quietly to herself. Not perfectly, not fast, just slowly. Later that morning, Maya walked to a small cafe near her home. The cafe was peaceful. Soft music played in the background, and people spoke quietly. She walked up to the counter. Her heart was beating fast, but she smiled. Hi, can I have a coffee, please? She said. Her voice was soft but clear. The man behind the counter smiled back. Of course. What kind of coffee would you like? Maya paused for a moment. She thought carefully. I would like a small latte, she said. Great choice, he replied. And just like that, the conversation was over. Simple, calm, easy. Maya walked away with her coffee and a small smile. She did it. She sat down near the window. The same feeling returned, but this time it felt stronger. Confidence. Not big confidence, just a little. But a little is enough. As she sipped her coffee, she listened to people around her. A couple was talking near her. What are you doing today? The woman asked. I'm going to work, then maybe relax at home, the man said. Maya listened carefully. She didn't understand every word, but she understood enough. And that was okay. Learning a language is not about perfection. It is about small moments, small steps, small wins, small progress every day. Later, Maya decided to try again. This time, she spoke to someone sitting next to her. Hi, is this seat taken? She asked. The woman smiled. No, it's free. Maya sat down. My name is Maya, she said. I'm Anna, the woman replied. They started talking slowly, simply, naturally. Maya made mistakes. She paused sometimes. She searched for words, but she didn't stop. And that made all the difference. Time passed slowly as the afternoon light moved across the cafe floor. The sound of cups, soft voices, and quiet music filled the space. Maya felt more relaxed now. She listened more closely. She noticed how people spoke, the rhythm of their words, the way they paused, the way they smiled while talking. She didn't try to understand everything. She just listened. Anna looked at her and asked, Do you come here often? Maya paused for a moment, thinking carefully. Not often, she said slowly. But I like it here. It feels calm. Anna nodded. I like it too. It's a good place to think. Maya smiled. Yes, and to learn. Anna tilted her head slightly. Learn what? Maya hesitated, then said softly, English. Anna's smile grew warmer. You're doing really well, she said. Those simple words stayed in Maya's mind. You're doing really well. They talked a little longer, about small things, daily things, what they like, what they do, nothing complicated, nothing perfect, just real conversation. And that was enough. After some time, Maya stood up. I have to go now, she said. It was nice talking to you. Anna nodded. It was nice talking to you too. Maybe I'll see you again. Maya smiled. Maybe. She walked outside. The air felt different now. Lighter, warmer. The world didn't feel as quiet as before. It felt open. As she walked down the street, she noticed little things. People talking on the phone, someone laughing, a car passing by with music playing. English was everywhere. Not something far away, not something impossible. It was all around her. She realized something again, something simple but important. You don't need to wait to be ready. You become ready by starting. Her steps slowed as she reached a small park. She sat on a bench and looked around. A child was playing. A man was reading. A woman was walking her dog. Life was moving. Slowly. Peacefully. Maya closed her eyes for a moment and listened. Not to understand everything. Just to feel the language. The sounds, the rhythm, the flow. And without noticing, she was learning. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The sun moved lower in the sky and the light turned golden. Maya opened her eyes and took a deep breath. She felt calm. Then she spoke softly to herself again. I can do this. Not loudly, not perfectly, but truly. She stood up and began walking again, slowly, calmly, noticing everything around her, listening to every small sound, every word, every voice, letting the language stay with her as the day continued, as the evening slowly began to arrive, as the sky changed colors and the world became quieter and still. She kept listening. She kept learning. She kept moving forward, one small step at a time, without rushing, without pressure, just continuing, just going, just growing, just becoming better. Little by little as the moments passed, and the story of her learning did not stop. It simply continued, gently, naturally, forward. The evening air became cooler as Maya continued walking, and the soft sound of leaves moving in the wind followed her down the quiet street. And she noticed how different everything felt now compared to the morning, how the same world could feel new simply because she felt different inside, calmer, more open, more willing to try without fear holding her back the way it used to. She passed a small store with bright lights inside, and for a moment she slowed down, looking through the window at the people standing in line, listening to their voices, catching small words, simple phrases. Thank you. Have a nice day. See you tomorrow. And even though she didn't understand every sentence, she understood enough to feel connected, enough to feel like she was no longer outside of the language, but slowly becoming part of it. Maya hesitated for just a second, then gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. The soft sound of the bell ringing above her head, and immediately she felt that familiar nervous feeling return. But this time, it didn't feel as strong. It didn't stop her. It simply existed, and she allowed it to be there while she kept moving forward. She walked slowly through the store, looking at the shelves, picking up small items, reading simple words on the labels, practicing quietly in her mind, not forcing anything, just observing, just letting the language stay around her naturally. And when she reached the counter, she placed her item down and looked up. Hi, she said, her voice steady. Hi, the cashier replied with a friendly smile. Maya paused for a moment, then said, Just this, please. Of course, the cashier said as they scanned the item. Do you need a bag? They asked. Maya thought for a second. No, thank you, she answered. All right, your total is $5, the cashier said. Maya reached into her pocket, handed the money, and softly said, Thank you. Have a nice evening, the cashier replied. You too, Maya said, and this time, it came out naturally, without hesitation. She walked out of the store with a small smile again, feeling that quiet confidence growing just a little more. Not something loud or overwhelming, just something steady, something real. The sky was darker now, and the streetlights began to turn on one by one, casting a soft glow on the sidewalk. And Maya continued walking, listening to the distant sounds of the city, the quiet conversations, the passing cars, the small pieces of English floating through the air, and she realized she didn't need to chase the language anymore. It was already around her, already part of her world. As she reached her home, she paused for a moment before going inside, looking up at the sky, taking a deep breath, and letting everything settle. All the small moments of the day, all the words she heard, all the sentences she tried, all the feelings she moved through, and she understood something deeper now, something she hadn't fully felt before. Learning is not one big moment. It is many small moments, connected together. Moments like ordering coffee, moments like saying hello, moments like listening quietly, moments like trying, even when it feels uncomfortable. She opened the door and stepped inside, the quiet of her room welcoming her again. But this time it didn't feel like the same quiet from the morning. It felt warmer, filled with something new, something growing. Maya sat down, not rushing to do anything, not reaching for her phone, not overthinking, just sitting there for a moment, letting her mind replay the day in a calm and gentle way, hearing the voices again, remembering the words, the small conversations, the simple sentences that once felt difficult, but now felt a little easier. She whispered softly, almost like a thought, "I'm learning." And she didn't question it. She didn't doubt it. She simply let it be true. Outside, the night continued to settle in, and the world grew quieter. But inside, something continued to move. Something continued to build. Something continued to grow without pressure, without force, just through listening, through trying, through being present in each moment as it came and passed and slowly turned into progress. The kind of progress you don't always see right away but can feel deep inside, steady and real, continuing forward, just like her, just like this journey, just like the story that keeps going, gently, naturally, without an end. And as the night grew deeper and quieter, Maya remained sitting in her room, not in silence, but in a kind of peaceful awareness, where every small sound seemed softer and every thought seemed slower. And she began to notice how different her mind felt compared to before, how it was no longer filled with pressure or the need to be perfect, but instead filled with curiosity, with patience, with a gentle openness that allowed her to learn without fear. And she leaned back slightly, closing her eyes for just a moment, listening again not to a specific voice, but to the memory of voices, the echo of conversations she had heard throughout the day, the rhythm of English flowing naturally through her thoughts. And even though she was not actively trying to study, her brain continued to absorb, continued to connect, continued to build understanding in a quiet and effortless way. And she realized that this is what it means to truly learn a language, not forcing every word, not translating every sentence, but allowing it to become familiar, allowing it to feel normal, like something that belongs in her daily life rather than something distant or difficult. And as she opened her eyes again, she looked around her room and softly began naming things in English without pressure, just small words, simple thoughts. Window, chair, light, door. And she smiled to herself because it didn't feel like studying. It felt like noticing. It felt like being present. And that feeling gave her a sense of calm confidence that stayed with her as the minutes passed and turned into a slow, peaceful night. And eventually she stood up and moved gently through her space, turning off the light, walking toward her bed, still thinking in small English phrases without forcing them, letting them come and go naturally. And as she lay down, she didn't rush to sleep right away. Instead, she listened again, this time to the quiet sounds of the night outside. A distant car passing, a faint voice somewhere far away, the soft movement of air, and she imagined herself in those small conversations. Imagined herself responding, speaking simply, calmly, without fear. And the more she imagined, the more natural it began to feel, as if her mind was practicing without effort, rehearsing without stress, just continuing the process in a way that felt almost effortless. And slowly her body relaxed more and more. Her breathing became steady and her thoughts became softer. But even as she drifted closer to sleep, the English she had heard and used throughout the day continued to stay with her, gently repeating in her mind like a quiet background rhythm. Not loud, not overwhelming, just present, just enough to remind her that she was improving, that she was moving forward. And somewhere between being awake and asleep, she felt a quiet sense of pride. Not because she was perfect, not because she knew everything, but because she showed up, because she tried, because she continued even when it felt uncomfortable. And that feeling stayed with her as the night passed and the hours moved slowly toward morning again. And even in her sleep, her brain continued to process, continued to organize, continued to learn in ways she couldn't see but could trust. And when the early light of a new day began to return, soft and gentle just like the morning before, Maya slowly opened her eyes, not with pressure, not with doubt, but with a quiet understanding that this journey was still going, still unfolding, still growing with every moment. And she stretched slightly, taking a deep breath, feeling that same calm energy return, and without even thinking too much about it, she softly said to herself, "Good morning." The words simple, natural, and real. And as she sat up and looked toward the window again, watching the light slowly fill the room, she didn't question if she was ready anymore. She didn't wonder if she was good enough. She simply allowed herself to continue, to listen, to try, to live inside the language a little more each day, knowing that progress was happening even in the smallest moments, knowing that every sound, every word, every attempt was building something stronger inside her. And so the day began again, not as a test, not as something to fear, but as another quiet opportunity to keep going, to keep listening, to keep becoming more comfortable, more confident, more connected. As the story continued forward, gently, naturally, without stopping, without rushing, just flowing, just growing, just continuing. And as the morning light slowly filled the room, soft and warm against the walls, Maya sat quietly for a moment, letting herself fully wake up without rushing, without reaching for anything, just breathing and noticing how calm she felt, how different this morning was from the ones before. And as she stood up and walked toward the window, she gently opened it, letting the fresh air move into the room, carrying with it distant sounds of life beginning again. Faint voices, a car passing, someone walking by, and she listened, not trying to understand everything, not forcing meaning, just allowing the sounds to exist around her. And in that moment, she realized that English was no longer something she needed to chase or struggle with. It was becoming something she could simply be around, something she could experience little by little, naturally. And she quietly said a few words to herself again, not to practice perfectly, but just to feel the language. It's a new day. It feels nice. I feel calm. And even though the sentences were simple, they felt real. They felt like hers. And that mattered more than anything. She moved slowly through her morning, making tea again, noticing each small action, and softly naming them in her mind without pressure. Water, cup, warm, careful. And she smiled because it didn't feel like studying anymore. It felt like living, like gently adding English into her day without forcing it. And as she sat down again, she thought about yesterday, about the cafe, the store, the conversations, the moments where she almost hesitated but continued anyway. And she realized that those moments were not big or dramatic, but they were powerful in a quiet way. They were the kind of moments that build real confidence over time, the kind that doesn't disappear quickly, the kind that stays and grows. And she held on to that feeling as she finished her tea and decided to step outside once more. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to continue, wanted to experience more, wanted to stay connected to this calm progress she was beginning to understand. The street was brighter now, more people moving, more sounds filling the air, and Maya walked slowly, observing everything around her, listening to small conversations as people passed by, catching words here and there. Morning, coffee, later, see you. And each word felt familiar in a way it hadn't before, like pieces of something she was slowly putting together without stress. And as she walked past a woman speaking on the phone, she heard, "I'll call you back." And she repeated it softly in her mind, not to memorize, but just to feel the flow of it, the natural rhythm. And she noticed how her brain didn't resist it anymore. It didn't feel heavy or confusing. It just passed through her mind calmly, like something she could understand a little more each time. She reached a small corner and paused, watching a man greet someone with a simple, "Hey, how are you?" And the response came easily, "I'm good. How about you?" And Maya felt a small spark of recognition, not because it was new, but because it felt clearer now, more natural, more real. And she softly repeated it again in her thoughts. "How are you?" "I'm good. How about you?" Letting the phrases settle gently inside her without pressure, and she continued walking, not rushing anywhere, just letting the world move around her, letting English exist naturally in her environment. And as the minutes passed, she realized something again, something even deeper this time, that learning wasn't happening in one place or one moment. It was happening everywhere, in every sound, every voice, every small interaction, and she didn't need to control it. She just needed to stay open to it. As she walked further, she noticed a small group of people laughing together, their voices light and relaxed. And even though she didn't understand every word, she understood the feeling, the tone, the connection. And it reminded her that language is not just about words. It's about emotion, about connection, about sharing moments, and that understanding gave her a different kind of confidence. One that didn't depend on knowing everything, but on being willing to be part of it, even in small ways. And she kept moving forward, step by step, breath by breath, listening, noticing, allowing herself to grow without forcing anything. As the day continued to unfold around her, as new sounds and new moments appeared and passed, and still she stayed in it, stayed present, stayed calm, letting everything build slowly inside her, layer by layer, word by word, feeling by feeling, as her journey continued, quietly, steadily, without pressure, without an end, just flowing forward, just expanding, just becoming more and more natural with every passing moment, as she kept listening, kept walking, kept learning, and kept going. And as the day continued to open up around her, Maya kept walking without a clear destination, allowing her steps to guide her naturally. And with each step, she felt more connected to everything around her, to the sounds, to the movement, to the language that no longer felt distant but gently familiar. And she noticed how her attention had changed, how she was no longer focused on what she didn't know, but instead on what she could understand, even if it was small, even if it was only a few words at a time. And that shift made everything feel lighter, easier, more possible. And as she crossed the street, she heard someone say, "Wait for me." And without thinking too much about it, she understood. She didn't stop to translate. She didn't question it. It simply made sense. And she felt that quiet satisfaction again, the kind that doesn't need to be announced, the kind that stays calm and steady inside. She continued down a path that led toward another small area filled with shops and open spaces, and there were more voices here, more conversations overlapping, people greeting each other, asking simple questions, sharing small pieces of their day, and Maya let herself stay in that environment, not trying to be part of every conversation, but allowing herself to hear it all, to absorb it naturally. And as she walked past a bench, she heard a woman say, "I'll meet you here later." And again, Maya understood enough, not every detail, but enough to feel connected, enough to feel like the language was no longer something she had to fight with, but something she could gently move with. She slowed her pace and sat down for a moment, watching people pass by, noticing the way they spoke, the way they paused, the way they smiled, the small expressions that came with their words. And she realized that understanding a language is not just about hearing words, but about noticing everything that comes with them: the tone, the feeling, the intention. And as she sat there, she softly repeated a few phrases in her mind, not perfectly, not with pressure, just allowing them to exist. I'll meet you later. Wait for me. How are you? Letting them flow through her thoughts like quiet echoes of the world around her. The time passed slowly, but it didn't feel long. It felt full, full of small moments that were building something inside her without her needing to force it. And eventually she stood up again, continuing her walk, feeling a little more comfortable, a little more steady. And she noticed that her breathing was calm, her thoughts were clear, and her focus was no longer on fear or doubt, but on presence, on simply being there, in the moment, in the language, without needing to control everything. As she moved further along, she passed by a small group of people having a conversation, and for a brief moment, she caught a sentence. That sounds like a good idea. And she paused slightly, letting the sentence settle in her mind, repeating it softly inside, feeling how it moved, how it sounded. And she realized that these small phrases were becoming more natural to her, not because she studied them over and over, but because she heard them, because she experienced them in real moments, and that made them easier to understand, easier to remember, easier to use. She continued walking again, her steps steady, her mind calm, and the world around her kept moving. People passing by, voices rising and falling, sounds blending together into a soft rhythm. And Maya stayed in that rhythm, not trying to separate every word, not trying to understand everything at once, just allowing the language to flow around her, trusting that her brain was learning, even in the background, even without effort. And as the day slowly began to shift again, as the light changed and the sound softened slightly, she felt that same quiet understanding return once more. Deeper this time, stronger, more certain that she didn't need to rush this process. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to compare herself to anyone else. She just needed to continue, to stay open, to keep listening, to keep showing up in small ways, and that was enough. And so she kept going, step by step, moment by moment, listening to the world around her, letting each sound become a small part of her learning, letting each word settle gently into her understanding. And even as the day continued to move forward, even as new moments came and went, her journey did not stop. It did not pause. It simply continued, quietly, steadily, naturally, without pressure, without an end, just flowing forward as she kept listening, kept noticing, kept growing, and kept becoming more and more comfortable with every passing moment, as everything around her became just a little more familiar, a little more clear, a little more hers. And still, she continued. And still, she continued, moving through the day as if she had stepped into a quiet rhythm that carried her forward without effort. And the more she stayed in that rhythm, the more natural everything began to feel, as if the language itself was no longer something outside of her, but something slowly blending into her thoughts, her surroundings, her awareness. And as she walked past another corner, she heard a simple conversation between two people standing nearby. "Did you finish it?" one asked, and the other replied, "Not yet, I'll do it later." And Maya didn't stop walking. She didn't pause to translate, but she understood enough, enough to feel the meaning, enough to recognize the flow. And that small understanding stayed with her as she continued forward, building quietly inside her like a steady foundation. The air shifted slightly as clouds began to move across the sky, soft shadows forming on the ground, and Maya looked up for a moment, taking in the calm movement above her. And she realized how much she had slowed down, not just physically, but mentally. How she was no longer rushing to learn everything at once, no longer pushing herself to be perfect, but instead allowing the process to unfold naturally. And in that space, learning felt easier, lighter, more sustainable, and she kept walking, letting her mind stay open, letting the sounds around her come and go without resistance. As she passed by a small outdoor seating area, she heard laughter again, light and relaxed, and someone said, "That's so funny," followed by another voice saying, "I know, right?" And Maya felt a quiet sense of familiarity with those phrases, not because she had memorized them, but because she had heard them before. And now they were beginning to feel natural, like pieces of a larger picture slowly coming together. And she softly repeated them in her mind, letting them settle without pressure, letting them become part of her internal understanding. She found herself walking without thinking too much about where she was going, just allowing the path to continue in front of her. And as she moved, she noticed how her thoughts were beginning to include English more often, small phrases appearing gently, not forced, not structured perfectly, but present. And she didn't try to correct them or question them. She simply allowed them to exist, knowing that this was part of the process, part of the growth that happens quietly over time. The day continued to shift slowly, the light softening again as the hours passed, and Maya eventually found herself near another quiet space, a place where fewer people were walking, where the sounds were softer, more spread out, and she slowed down again, taking a deep breath, feeling grounded, feeling present. And she sat down once more, letting herself rest without turning away from the world, still listening, still aware, still connected to the language that moved around her in gentle waves. A voice in the distance said, "I'll see you tomorrow." And another responded, "Take care." And Maya listened, letting the words pass through her without effort, understanding the feeling behind them, the simplicity of the exchange. And she realized that so much of language is simple. So much of it is repeated in small ways every day. And by listening, by being present, she was beginning to recognize those patterns, those familiar sounds, those common phrases that make communication feel natural. She stayed there for a while, not counting time, not measuring progress, just being in the moment. And as she eventually stood up again, she felt something steady inside her, something calm and grounded, something that didn't need to prove anything, didn't need to rush, didn't need to compare, just something that knew it was moving forward, slowly but surely. And she began walking again, her steps light, her mind clear, her attention open, letting the day continue to unfold around her, letting the language continue to flow into her awareness. And even as the sky began to change again, even as the sounds shifted and softened once more, she did not feel like she was reaching an end. She did not feel like the journey was stopping, because it wasn't. It was continuing in every moment, in every sound, in every quiet realization that built inside her, as she kept listening, kept noticing, kept allowing herself to grow without pressure, without force, just gently, naturally, endlessly, as everything around her became part of the learning, and everything within her continued to open, to expand, to understand more with each passing moment, and still, without hesitation, without doubt, she continued. And still, without hesitation, without doubt, she continued, letting her steps carry her forward into the quiet evening that was slowly returning once again. And this time, everything felt even more familiar, as if the world she was walking through was the same. But her understanding of it had gently expanded, and she noticed how her ears were more open now, how her mind no longer tried to catch every single word, but instead allowed meaning to come naturally, like recognizing a melody without needing to hear every note perfectly. And as she passed by a couple walking side by side, she heard one of them say, "It's getting colder." And the other replied, "Yeah, but it feels nice." And Maya didn't pause, didn't overthink. She simply understood the feeling behind the words, the simple exchange, and she let it stay with her for a moment before it gently faded into the background of her thoughts. The streetlights flickered softly as they turned on again, one by one, casting a warm glow across the sidewalk, and Maya slowed her pace slightly, not because she was tired, but because she wanted to stay in this feeling a little longer, this calm, steady awareness where everything around her felt connected, where every sound, every voice, every small phrase contributed to her learning without pressure. And as she continued walking, she realized that she wasn't just hearing English anymore. She was beginning to feel it, to sense it, to understand it in a way that didn't require constant effort. And that realization brought a quiet sense of confidence that settled deeply inside her. She passed by a small group of people standing near a corner, their voices overlapping in light conversation, and she caught another phrase, "I'll text you later," followed by laughter, and she smiled softly to herself, recognizing how natural it sounded, how simple it was, and without trying, she repeated it gently in her mind, letting it become familiar, letting it blend into the growing collection of phrases that now lived quietly within her understanding. And she kept moving forward, her steps steady, her breathing calm, her thoughts soft and open. As she reached a quieter part of the street, the sounds became more distant, more spaced out, and Maya welcomed the silence, not as something empty, but as something peaceful, something that allowed her to notice her own thoughts more clearly. And she realized that even in the quiet, the learning didn't stop, because now the language was beginning to appear within her, small words and phrases rising naturally without effort. And she didn't question them, didn't correct them. She simply allowed them to be there, part of her growing familiarity with the language. She looked up at the sky again, now darker, with only a soft glow remaining near the horizon, and she took a slow breath, feeling the cool air, feeling grounded in the moment, and she softly whispered to herself, "It's a nice evening." The sentence simple, natural, and real, and she smiled because it didn't feel forced, it didn't feel like practice, it felt like expression, and that difference meant everything. The more she walked, the more she noticed how her body felt relaxed, how her mind felt clear, how the pressure she once carried was slowly fading away, replaced by a quiet trust in the process. A trust that she was learning even when she wasn't trying, even when she was simply listening, simply existing within the language. And she realized that this is where true progress begins. Not in stress, not in perfection, but in presence, in allowing, in continuing without fear. And so she kept going, not searching for a destination, not trying to reach an end, but simply continuing, step by step, moment by moment, letting each sound become part of her awareness, letting each phrase settle gently into her understanding, letting each experience shape her confidence in a quiet and steady way. And as the night continued to deepen, as the world around her softened into calm stillness, her journey did not slow down, it did not pause. It simply continued, flowing forward just as naturally as her breath, just as gently as her steps, just as steadily as her growing understanding, and without needing to say anything more, without needing to prove anything, she remained in that space of quiet learning, quiet confidence, quiet progress, as everything around her and within her moved together, seamlessly, endlessly, forward. And still, she continued.